Good afternoon, everyone, once more, those who just joined, and a very warm welcome to Contractor Management webinar. I'm grateful that you have chosen to be with us. It is really an honor for me to serve you in the next 60 minutes. And for those who don't know me, my name is Julia Mamakoko, your fantastic host. I hope you already like my voice and my face and everything, because if that is already checked, then we're going to have fun in this. But I'm joined by my two Leonard colleagues, Tony Titlek and Venji Mary, who's also, you can see their beautiful faces there on the screen. They will be sharing with us principles and best practices of contractor management, which I hope you'll find valuable and practical enough for you to take away something to actually apply in your environment. And if you can't, you can come to us, who will help you apply. So you still have that option as well. Just to give you a bit of introduction on our speakers, Venji is a gorillas hunter. That's not how she put it, but I'm going to explain why I see hunting in it. She likes going out into the mountain hiking to look out for gorillas. So to me, it's hunting, all right? And when she's not doing that, she's making sure that appointed contractors who we see as an extension of Pragmat deliver on their service level agreements. She brings 15 years of experience in this topic, not gorilla hunting experience, but maintenance management, operations management, and project management experience. So she's going to be really breaking it down for us in practical ways because this impacts her, contractor management particularly. Tony, on the other hand, she is a trailblazer with 20 years of experience in risk and compliance. She's currently challenging the industry on how it views compliance and risk management, particularly in enterprise asset management. So in a way, she's a hunter too, just for new ways of working. And she already has my vote on that. You will see why shortly. And so before we kick off, I just want us to do a quick poll. Don't worry, it's only 3 questions. And this poll is going to test your position on contractor management. I just want to understand your understanding of contractor management, how you view contractor management. And so if you watch out on your screen, you will see a pop-up coming. Each question will take about 20 seconds before it disappears. And if you can please answer as quickly as you can so that my learned colleagues here can understand the level of detail that they need to go into. So I see the first question has already popped up there. And the question is your contractor management process digitalized and automated? All right, very interesting there. So about 60 says no. Come on, keep coming, keep coming. There are what? 56% of you say no. And some say partially. By the way, what I mean, or in my understanding, there's a difference between digitalization and automation. So digitalization just means the paperwork process that we normally do when we onboard a contractor is done digitally. And the automation is once an activity ends, it triggers another activity to follow and etc. So if you can think in that frame as well. Interesting. So 53 of you say no, and 16% of you say partially, and 32% of you say yes. Okay, so we still have a lot of work to do with the no's there, but it can be done. And Venji and Tony are going to show us exactly how it can be achieved. So you are at the right webinar on the right day with the right people. So hopefully when I ask this question 12 months from now, we would see more yeses and less noise there. Thanks, Nagam. So we can skip to the next one. The next question. Which of these top 5 pains of contractor management do you relate to? HSSE there stands for health, safety, security, and environment. Permit to work, record management. Do you know who's doing what, where, when, even how much that is going to cost? Or performance management if the contractors are meeting your service level agreements. Contractor vetting and accreditation. Oh, okay. I was going to ask if no one feels a bit of pain in that. Interesting. For those who just joined, we're doing a quick poll. So please look out on your screen and try to answer the question as quickly as you can. And when you get a moment, also just type in the chat box there where you are joining us from. Okay. So majority of you say, well, not majority. Let's start. HSSE compliance and tracking, 21% of you. It seems like it's a pain. That's understandable. And Tony and Benji, they're going to show us how that can be made much more easier using technology. I see permit to work also. Some people relate to that pain. Record management, okay, very few there. Performance management, yes, that is very important. And again, through using technology, we would show you how exactly we can help you there. Contractor vetting and accreditation, only 16% of you sort of relate to that pain. All right, great. Thank you for answering. Let's go to the last question. Which of these standards is or are linked to contractor management? For those who say all of the above, I want to know why. I really do. Is it all of the above because you think all of them are applicable, or you just pick the one that you think it's probable? The high probability of being right is high when you say all of the above. Okay, I saw 55,000. So no one thinks that ISO 55,000 touches contractor management in a way? All right, while you're answering there, I'm just going to address this question quickly from Hein. Hein, you're saying the sound is terrible. Does everyone else experience the same? Can you all hear me fine? How is the sound for you? If you can indicate in the chat box, please. Because I really want you to hear me and my presenters. All right. Okay, Hein, I am so sorry. It seems like the problem is on your side. Let's hope it improves as we go on. All right. That was the last question. So, Tony, what do you think? Does our audience know the standards?
Very knowledgeable, yes.
Very knowledgeable. Okay, if Tony is happy, then yeah, I'm also happy. I'm not knowledgeable myself, so don't look at me for answers. Look at Tony and Benji for the answers. All right, thank you so much for your participation. It's interesting. So why we do this, we just want to sort of see at what level should we present our content. So already you're giving Tony an idea that you are familiar with the standards that are applicable in this environment. So you won't have to go into too much detail, but we can focus more on addressing your specific questions. So please keep it interactive. Do ask questions as we go through. As I said, we will pause the presentation to take the question, or we can address it later. If we still can't get to it, we will send an email with all the responses. Thank you, Nagamso, and thank you all for your participation. I'm sure now you want to hear Tony's voice, and I'm going to allow you to hear her voice. Now, one thing that I want Tony to kick off with for us is to understand what we talk about when we talk about risk. In my mind, for contractor management to happen, there has to be a contractor, right? And that contractor, it can be one person or one company, and it can be 10,000 contractors managed by one entity. So the bigger the number of contractors, the bigger the risk exposure that an organization will experience. What do we mean exactly by that, Tony? If you can just break it down for us and take us through what you have prepared.
Great. Thanks a lot for that, Julia. I think based on our poll results, I might need to throw my slides out the window, but let's see how that goes this afternoon. I think let me start off by saying that, coming into this presentation, Julia actually asked me to cover quite a bit of the theoretical aspects behind contractor management. And I must admit that I'm actually quite aware that, theory, unless you're sitting in a classroom, can become a little bit tedious. So I am going to try my best to fly through my slides and the theoretical part so that we can get to the really good stuff, which is essentially your questions and what you are interested in learning this afternoon. So let's pop right to it. And in an attempt to answer your question, Julia, I think risk and compliance management is an exceptionally wide field. It can encompass quite a few organizational areas, which really actually brings me to the first principle. And what I'm hoping to do this afternoon is really just to take you through three sort of overarching principles as far as risk and compliance is concerned, and then really start drilling into the contractor management principles that I would like to share with you this afternoon. So with that being said, I am trying to get to my next slide. Great. So I think in any sort of risk and compliance management practice, like I said before, it's an extremely wide field. It is an extremely complex field, and you do need some kind of a model to really start organizing your thoughts and your efforts around risk and compliance management. So with that being said, there are a number of really great models out there. I tend to prefer those that are normed to international standards. And from our perspective, the ISO standard has been very useful for us in providing a model to try and organize organizational risk within our business. With that being said, the second important principle from that perspective is really to understand what it is that you want from the process. We don't just manage risk for the sake of managing risk. That organizational function very much is in support of strategy. So with that being said, you want to understand what your larger organizational strategy is, and then be able to position your risk and compliance efforts or investments into that function in such a way that it is supportive of your overall strategy as well. What you see on the screen is a very high-level representation of an exercise that we did, and that the items on the screen were particular pain points for a client of ours. And what we were challenged with was to really take those expectations and develop a very specific strategy in support of that, that we could actually deliver via various of our solutions to our clients. The third and final principle is, of course, how do you measure your efforts? There's the old saying of if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I think from a risk management perspective, that also rings true. But again, given the complexity of the environments that we do operate in, it does become very daunting very quickly to try and ascertain what your risk indicators are, which one of those metrics are essentially important in support of your strategic plan. So from that perspective, again, the best advice I can give you is to, again, land on a model that would really just help you organize the various indicators or metrics that you deem important to take along with your journey. Great. This brings me really to the contractor management bit. But what I want to do now is just take you through a number of principles that have actually worked very well for us, not just within our own organization, but also in terms of those clients where we do contractor management for them in support of their asset management endeavors. So I'm just going to run through them very quickly. And I think the first of those elements or those principles really relates to that complexity side of things. When we talk about risk management, like I said, it's a very daunting, very wide field. But let's take HSSE as an example. And the reason why I'm choosing HSSE as part of this conversation is really because it is a very complex area. It is extremely regulated from a legislative point of view. We generally find that your cost of compliance in the HSSE space is exceptionally high. And as it stands at the moment, we are very dependent on human resources to achieve that desired level of compliance from an HSSE point of view. So let's use that as our focus area and take a look at how we essentially manage HSSE within the contractor management space. So with that being said, what we've done, for example, from an accreditation or a certification point of view, in older models, we would get an opportunity once every year or once every 2 years to engage with the contractor and really do a deep dive into their management systems and try and understand what the degree of maturity is as far as their compliance. What we've since done from a newer approach and in terms of a newer paradigm is to really argue that we want to create more engagements with our contractors to really discuss maturity around compliance, but also to really take deep dives into certain areas that could be of concern or where we feel that we wanted to increase particular performance. So from that point of view, we went from one big sort of assurance exercise on a yearly or a 2-yearly cycle to smaller assurance clusters through the course of a 12-month period. Secondly, from a principal point of view, there should always be an end game. We like to norm whatever it is that we do to a recognized standard, preferably one that is internationally recognized, and that does carry quite a bit of credibility. One of those would typically be the ISO standards. So currently what we do is we really use ISO standards to give structure to our management systems and then populate those structures with legislative requirements and also those client-specific ambitions that we want to deliver on. From a third point of view, and this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, is we need to create a culture within our contractor base that moves away from just ticking boxes. And with that being said, the principle is that we don't want to do compliance for compliance sake, but that whatever we do from a compliance perspective must actually add value in support of that goal zero ambition. Fourth principle really looks at that work is done component. Now, for those of you who are very familiar with the compliance space, whether it's HSSE, whether it's quality management, whether it is food safety, you'll know that a lot of the focus from an assurance perspective is often on the paperwork bit, that desktop auditing, look what is written in policies and procedures. What we've since done is we've actually completely toppled that around. And from our perspective, we are keeping a very keen, almost aggressive focus on work that is done at the cold face. And that is really where we are applying the majority of our energies and our efforts from a compliance point of view. Moving along, I think one of the things that have been most enlightening from a contractor management perspective is the notion that we view our contractors as we do our clients. So from a pragma point of view, we prefer to engage with our clients as partners. And then in terms of our contractors as well, we have adopted this notion of considering our contractors as we do our clients. And with that goes a bunch of things like organizational care, ensuring that we are adding value to our contractors as well, but that we're also enabling them in support of a longer term sustainability vision. The next principle really relates to the hierarchy of control. Again, the HSSE practitioners would be able to relate to this quite strongly. And what we've done is really to ensure that we play in the top end of the hierarchy of control. So again, in line with one of the previous principles, we're moving away from that purely administrative view to really start looking at how do we actually eliminate risk rather than just managing it. Again, we want to create scenarios where we could incentivize good performance. That's not just from an HSSE point of view, but in terms of quality management, the level of workmanship that our contractors are delivering. It's very important that we incentivize that good performance to really motivate the supply chain to achieve that degree of excellence. Finally, it's really been important for us to, whatever we create from a system and a solution point of view, to always consider scale. Now, for most organizations and most client, growth is exceptionally important. And from a support service point of view, which is really your risk and compliance domain, we wanted to ensure that whatever we did was scalable. So what we have should be applicable, whether it's a client with localized contract engagements or whether it's a client that maintains a national network of contractors, and in some cases, even clients that are maintaining contractors that are working cross-border in multiple global territories. And then the final principle, and again, this is something that I'm personally very passionate about, is this whole notion that we need to understand what our broader purpose is. So for most organizations, it's not just about profit and people anymore. We really want to position our organizations as contributing to broader society, contributing to the communities in which we operate. So this whole idea of sustainable development is something that we choose to really embrace as part of our contractor management endeavors, and that creates a lot of commonality in vision, and really gives us that sort of central point in which we can anchor our relationships. Great. I think then if I can just summarize, and this is, I think, the crux of what we believe is the answer to where we're going in the future. I think in the older types of scenarios, something like HSSE, for example, was a process that mostly ran in parallel to most other business processes. From a management system point of view, it was very often a very closed system that was managed independently in isolation, and here and there you would have a touch point typically with other business processes like your work planning and control. What we're saying at this point in time is that something like compliance, whether it's, again, HSSE, quality management, whatever the domain is, should be completely woven into the fabric of the operation. We have drawn on a biological term called endosymbiosis, and what that really means is that we are making HSSE part of the broader enterprise asset management process. So from a practical point of view, if I can give an example, if you consider work orders that are given to contractors to perform a particular activity, HSSE is not something that you would do as an afterthought or separate to that process. And from that point of view, we've actually merged things like permit to work and your critical control management as part of your work order and your work planning process. Looking at a few practical examples, and here I'm looking at contractor accreditation. That's really that assurance piece that gives you or your boards and even your clients that assurance that our contractors are compliant. So what we've done in a particular case is we've used our own enterprise asset management system, which is OnKey, as a means to create a centralized database of contractors. We've then, created particular tools, some of them as simple as an application on a mobile phone or on a tablet that enables us to capture assurance data on our contractors. That obviously is then represented back into various dashboards and reports that enables us to slice and dice a little bit about data to see what our trending is and where there are gaps from a sort of network perspective. If I just take a look at a particular client example, the client came to us with a specific set of requirements from an HSSC point of view. And what we then did for the client is to combine that with the legal requirements and some best practice standards. And we basically created a centralized platform of accreditation within our enterprise asset management system. We put a tool in the hands of assurance workers that really enabled them to very seamlessly and easily collect assurance data. The nice thing about having this in a system, it's not just digitalization, where we're taking a checklist and transforming that into a digital checklist. What we do have in this example is a lot of functionality, a lot of automation, so that transactional part of the work is actually removed from your assurance workers, which gives us the benefit that people who work in HSSC in this type of scenario actually has the opportunity to use that intellectual ability, and that takes us back to adding a lot of value to our contractors. So that in a nutshell took a little bit longer than I expected, but that's really a few things that I wanted to share with you this afternoon. And yes, let's see if there are any particular questions or areas that you would like us to cover in greater detail.
While they are still thinking about the questions to ask, I've got one or two. If we can just go back to right at the beginning where you mentioned you called it a degree of maturity in compliance. And in my mind, I'm just thinking in an environment where you have more than 1,000 contractors that you are working with and you want to do that maturity checklist, how would you go about that? I'm sure it's a big project, and how do you manage it and do it better?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. I think what one first needs to understand is that you get various different levels of maturity in different contexts. So you will find that there are particular industries or particular sectors of industry where contractors in general have either a higher or a lower level of maturity from a compliance point of view. There are also those types of scenarios where the environment is so diverse that your contractor base becomes so diverse that you have a little bit of everything in one particular supply chain. The important aspect there is to really land on what your standards are. That's where the standardization conversation becomes extremely important. And what you want to create is a set of standards that you want your entire contractor database to achieve. To give you an idea, we have embarked on a particular journey with a client where we're taking an entire contractor base. At the moment, it's probably in the region of about 90 contractor companies, and we want to take them on the ISO 45001 certification journey. Now, you can imagine to get one company certified against that standard is a big ask, and we've taken on 90 of those. And based on that, we've really created a solution and a roadmap to systematically take those contractor companies through a process where they can develop their management systems, thereby developing their maturity through culture and those wonderful things that we need in support of compliance, but systematically taken them through a very specific process to achieve a very specific standard. So from that perspective, you can't do that in a paper-based type of environment, especially not when you're working with that volume of contracting companies. And again, the platform that we've created from a digital point of view really becomes key, because that's where we can populate that digital environment with our agreed standard, and then really start driving actions and activities in support of that. That gives us the ability to also track, how far in the process is a particular contractor, are they actually closing out, are they actioning in line with what the expectation is. So it's really that digital element does give us the ability to keep a very close eye on our contractor base, either as a whole or at individual contracting company level or even technician level from that point of view. I hope that answers your question.
It does in detail. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Another question is on the point where you say we should start seeing our contractors as client.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting. I actually haven't thought of it until you mentioned it. And it is important. I mean, if I can just imagine being a mutual relationship where if I see them as a client to me that I'm serving, they will return that favor. And you want them to actually do that because they're serving your client on your behalf as well. Can you just elaborate more on that, on exactly how, in practical terms, would you do that? And I'm just interested, and I want to start seeing my gardening contractors and all of the other contractors as client as well, and see how I can apply that in my own personal space.
Great. Yes, Julia. So I think our contractor as client is a concept that we've very recently come up with, and it really plays around the whole idea of your contractor being a partner. At the end of the day, in this particular context, without contractors, you're actually not achieving a very important strategic objective for the business. So given that strategic importance of the contractor, it is critical that you do foster that partnership relationship. What that also does is for us, we needed to, again, in support of the sustainability conversation, ensure that we continuously keep adding value to our contractors. Now, from an HSSE point of view, you often hear contractors complaining that your cost of compliance might be extremely high. Given the current climate at the moment, it really is for your smaller type businesses, your SME type businesses, really very challenging to maintain compliance purely as a result of the cost that is often associated with that. So from what we've done is, in terms of this digital platform that we have built, we actually have been able to take a bit of that functionality and make that available to our contractors as well. So instead of saying to the contractor, well, you need to go and invest in some kind of a system to try and manage this very heavy compliance burden, we actually like the idea of going back to our contractors and say, you know what, we've already created the system, and we would like to make it available to you. Your data is sitting there as well, as part of the assurance journey, but use that as your platform to really manage the system. And by doing that, your contractor essentially is becoming a client. They're using our enablement, a bit of our technology and our resources to try and make their lives a little bit easier, but also to optimize what they do and to really get them in a more productive space. So that's just one example of how we want to bring that idea of contractor as client across.
That is very interesting. Thank you, Tony. I'm going to share a joke. Well, it was a joke until now. So when the word contractor management comes, I'm thinking the Contractor, the movie, if you've watched that movie, where one person is targeted, and once they've delivered on what they needed to deliver, then the whole world is out and looking for that person to just eliminate them, something like that. If you watch The Extraction, those kind of movies where there's a lot of mistrust, there's a lot of revenge going on, and in this case, I get a sense that we don't deal with that.
You don't want that sense of mistrust in your contractor base. in Pragma, we have a model that we call the Exico Beat model, and it's really based on the Semco style. And one of the, the critical pillars in all of that is that extreme stakeholder alignment. Again, you need to be aligned between yourselves and your contractors in terms of what the output should be. And you can't really get that relationship to the level that you want without trust. So I guess the next question is, how do you build trust? How do you create a culture of psychological safety where trust almost is automatic or happens by default? Those things are not easy. But good strategy would be to, get the transactional stuff out the way so that you can really focus on this important bit of getting that alignment, maintaining it, building a culture of trust, so that you can increase the output and the performance of your contractors at the end of the day.
Which are your extension of your team in our case, because
Absolutely.
we rely heavily on them to deliver on what Pragma promises to our clients.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to stuff that extraction and the contractor movie stories that I get. That's not what contractor management is all about. That's what I get now. All right, Benji, do your contractors trust you?
Well, we certainly hope so. And it's definitely a journey. We're trying to move in the direction where we have the tools and the transparency that gives the contractor, like we're saying, a partnership feeling where they do trust us, where they're able to see all the information they need to see. And, nothing is hidden. Everything is transparent and in the open. We have open discussions as adults in this partnership. And that's really where we want to move towards. So, listening to 20 give you basically our thought processes prior to this. I'm going to try and give a little bit more practical on how it is that we're working on a day-to-day basis, how it is that contractors come on board with Pragma, and then taking it into some of the tools that we use and some of the process flows that we try to go through. Just to bear in mind, I'm obviously using examples, and if it is in a particular sector, then we would align to what the requirements of that client or that sector actually is. So it's quite a flexible system that we use, although we do try to standardize our processes across the board.
Great.
So I'll
look forward to you. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Julia. So let me start off with, how do we engage with our contractors? So you receive a client that comes on board, or you are a plant and you would like Pragma to manage your contractors on your behalf. That takes away a portion of your risk, a portion of your time and resources, where you hand over that responsibility to Pragma and we then take it on from there. So the first step that we do is we actually clarify the scope of work, exactly what it is that you need. And then we go out and source and ensure that the contractors that we're sourcing are actually accredited to do a particular kind of work. So for example, if you're working in food, then you have to ensure that contractors understand the standards and comply with the standards in that particular sector. If it's oil and gas, that they ensure that they comply with the high level of risk and the accreditation that's required to work with particular equipment. And we go through that entire process when we send out an RFI or an RFP, and we go through an accreditation check, a compliance, before we actually onboard that contractor into our system. We ensure that they have the correct resources to do the job, and then we make sure that, they're able to cope with the capacity of the work. So if there's multiple work streams that need to be handled, then we make sure that that is done before we actually onboard that contractor, that they can cope with the work that we're giving them. We then, once they're signed on and they're onboarded with us, we start the actual contractor management process. So the first thing is to decide and align on what it is that we're going to measure. You would have heard Tony say, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So we decide on what is the KPIs that we're going to be measuring these contractors on, what is the service level agreement that we expect from them. And once we do that and we get that information into the system, we manage that all automatically. So we use an asset enterprise management system, whether it's OnKey, which we particularly use, or whether it's the client's management system, and we're able to make sure we put in the information that we need in order to measure exactly the performance of the contractor. If the performance is on track, we can, pick up exactly where the pains are. We then have interventions where we look at those managements, we look at non-compliance, we have these consultations and discussions with the contractor in a partnership discussion. Where are your points that you need to improve? Where are you doing great in? We want to see you do more of that. And then pushing it a bit forward. If you are complying and you're doing things that you need to do, how can we then improve on that performance? What support do you need to take it to the next step? If we're talking about sustainability, if we're talking about focus improvement, which is continuous improvement activities, how can we help you? How can we get you there? We then look at the work management process. So we provide the tools that are needed in order for you to comply when doing your work on site. So we use applications and tools which can be used on tablets or mobile phones because we're moving forward. So, a short while ago, we used to say the change is coming. And I think what we really need to understand is the change is already here. And as a contractor base and as someone that needs to move with the times, contractors and their staff need to start aligning with the fact that we are moving to complete digital. There isn't the waste of paper documents. The traceability is much more we trust it a lot more because you do not lose your paper trail. You have everything online in a cloud. You can easily access it. You can easily assess it. You can audit it. The trail is there, and it just makes everything a lot easier. So the approach that Pragma is using is very much online, cloud-based, using applications that are extremely easy to access and extremely easy to use. So we would align on what the process is, on how you're going to manage your workflow, how you're going to receive your work orders. For example, if it is a maintenance or a project plan that we have for you, we have a call center that we use to assign these work orders to you. We have field and services teams that approve work. You may have a quoting system in which you do that, all of that online on the system. And we provide these tools to the contractors. The tools themselves are not additional, you're not charged to use them, but you are trained to use them. You are trained on how you're expected to deliver your work according to this process. We also use our online tools to do permit to work and HSSC compliance, as Tony has mentioned, where you receive a work order and you actually complete your work permit to work on the very same work order. So it is not a separate document. It's on the same work order. It's a click of a button to access it later on. It's a click of a button to edit it. And it's very easy for us to then ensure that compliance on the specific day that the actual work is taking place. We also then have the supply chain management support. So you've signed your contract, but now we want to make sure that the agreements are clear. If there are any changes to the agreement, that conversation can take place formally. If there are changes to your rates, to your scope of work, that we can make sure that we understand what those changes are. We can include that into our contractual agreement with you. And it's very much a discussion on the changes that needs to happen. Pragma is also very passionate about transformation. And if the company requires support in ensuring that, they transform and that we are able to provide that support and have those discussions with them. So I just want to share with you an example of what type of report you could see if you were working with Pragma and the type of things that we would actually track. So if we look at your work orders and how much work is going through the system, how much of that have you actually met your service level agreement? So we can see if the contractors' teams have gone out on time, if they were able to deliver the service, and we're now, tracking that to say, oh, excellent. So in April, you actually did really well, and you achieved 95% of your target, or, actually 100% in this case. 88 over the month of March. Where was the gap? Why is it that you didn't achieve your target? How can we improve that? With HSSC, if we're looking at, have you been reporting near misses? potential incidents? Are you identifying risk? You learn a lot about the culture of your company by tracking this. You learn a lot about your employees. Are they actually paying attention when they're out there on site? And we can see what are the risks that they're faced with daily that we may not see, from the behind the desktop, because they are actually out there on site. And we're able to get a lot of indication from that. We then look at the quality of the work. So if we get a call back and you have to do rework, then there's obviously a challenge with your quality. If you have to then look at whether it was a reactive call, the costs, we can also track the costs of your spend. We can look at optimizing your routing if you have multiple sites to visit, or if you're on a plant and you have multiple work orders in a specific area within the plant, we can optimize the work that goes into that. And then again, of course, if you have transformation on mind, we can also assist you and track you with that. What level are you at? Where are you moving towards? What is your purpose and your goal? So how we usually work, and this is just an example, we would then get a client who would log a call through a call center or through our application, again, all totally online. We would log that request. We would then post that we'd review it to make sure we understand the scope, and then we would allocate it to the appropriate contractor who has a particular skill with that. So whether it's electrical, whether it's, civil works or whichever mechanical, then we would allocate it to that specific contractor within a region so that they can get there on time. We assign that to the contractor. The contractor uses our tools, which we have, which is called a contractor portal, to a work manager application where they assign their technician to it, and they can track when that technician has gotten to site, how long the technician has taken to complete the work, review the PTW and HSSC documents, all online, and then be able to scrutinize that work and assure that it's done in a compliant way. Once that work is done, if you're required to do a quote, you would do it on your contractor portal. And if you're required to invoice, you would also invoice on the contractor portal. What's really important is that because we want to use online and we want to drive a partnership, the contractor base has to understand that in order to comply, documentation is extremely important, because we have to prove that you did do your risk assessment and that you did actually complete your work by signing it off, by submitting the document. It's reviewed, it's accepted, it's approved, and then, you obviously invoice, and that gets paid through automatically. We then also just want to give you an example of what one of our tools might look like. It's as easy as putting in your email address. So like you would sign into Facebook or Instagram or any tool that you're using to Strava, for example. You put in your email address, you would be given your password, and you can obviously set your password yourself. And very easily on your screen, on your tablet, on your mobile, you would then get a visual of exactly what work orders are allocated to you, what status they're currently sitting in, and what it is that you need to do, who's responsible for it, who then you need to follow up with on a daily basis, and exactly where it lies. So I hope that's been helpful for you, and we can obviously then chat a little bit more if you have a little bit more questions that you want to ask. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you very much, Benji. It is quite interesting. And if I can just summarize what you've highlighted, from my point of view, I see a lot of work around contractor management, but that work is actually simplified using technology.
Yes, it's a lot more simplified. And I think the very important thing here is the measurement. You want to be able to see where you are in terms of your performance. So if you are a contractor and you want to provide a service to your client and you want to prove that I have historical data I can show for my next client, when you're putting out a tender for your next bid, you want to prove that I've done well previously and I can do this work. So how is this going to help them is that it shows and it tracks and it proves I am capable. I have done what I've said that I can do, and I can do more. And let me show you how much more I can do. So it also helps in terms of compliance. So you've got a safety officer that may be able to get to site or a portion of the plant once a day. But they really want to make sure that the team is complying. So what they would do then is access the application from the office or from another area that they're in, and very easily be able to see if the guys have completed their permit properly. Have they signed off properly? Do they require, additional support? And they can easily go down to that area or, make a call if it's obviously they're working in an area where they can take calls and address that immediately. There isn't the delay that you would generally have with the paperwork exercise. And then, if you deal with things immediately, it drives the message home a lot better than if you have to wait for a review or an audit session, or only when maybe you're going through an ISO audit. A lot of times contractors or companies in general will address issues when it is an audit finding. And that is not the message though, or the heart that Pragma is trying to drive. We're saying, do your work every day according to the way you're supposed to, and you won't even be concerned about an audit. An auditors come and you're like, yes, we welcome you.
I'm ready for it.
Yes, we're ready for it.
That's what they will be saying. Tell me about the process of onboarding the contractors quickly, especially when you start introducing this technology to them. I mean, some of them, you found them out there not having done what we do, or maybe they haven't done what we do, but not the way we do it. I'm sure there's a bit of resistance sometimes there on just adapting to the new ways of working. How has that been?
So I wouldn't call it resistance. I would say that it's just unfamiliar. And it's a lot of working in it, like you're saying, a new way. So what we try to do is when we introduce the use of applications and tools. So firstly, we discuss the scope with you. We've checked that you have the correct resources. And we expect that the resources you have would be of the ability to use technology. We also ask, will they have a mobile? Will they have a tablet in order to access these tools? We'll then share with them what the process flow will actually be, how the tools will look. We take them through the actual step-by-step screenshots, as I would show you here, how it would look, how you can click on which sections to see what you want to see, and exactly what you should be tracking and tracing. So it is a lot of training. In the event that there is an issue with the app, or there's an issue with a change in your staff, or, people forget what they were taught or trained, we also provide the support. So you can call Pragma, the team that you're working with. We will allocate a specific person that the contractors can call, and they will take you through the process to show you where you might have made an error. Sometimes we try to submit a document and a big error pops up. So we will take you through the error, try and find the root cause of where that issue may come from, and retrain, constantly retraining, regrouping, making sure that we recap, and we also monitor how the contractors are using the applications, because we can very easily see if you've claimed to have completed a work, then if it's sitting there for longer than 10, 15 days, why have you not submitted your documentation and invoiced? You want to get paid as soon as you possibly can. And here we can easily see, you say you've completed it, but you haven't completed your documentation. And we follow up on that really quickly to make sure we catch where it is that the misunderstanding may be.
That is very interesting. Let's quickly have a look if we have questions. Any questions? How are you approaching contractor management in your environment? To what extent do you use technology to track their performance? Okay. Anyone? I've got a very shy audience, but it's okay. Let's continue talking. Yes, Benji.
Maybe one of the things, like, we've got the from the poll results that there are pains that the clients are experiencing with their contractors. So if anyone would like to share a particular example or a general example, and we can possibly comment on that and make suggestions, that they could use, a quick win, let's call it, if anybody would like to do that, they're welcome to do that now.
Yeah, and another question that I'd like an answer from the audience also is the ESG. How often or how important is it for you to actually ask that question to your contractors that come to do work for you? Is it something that you're already discussing it, or you're still struggling with just the onboarding process and getting the quality right and safety and all of that?
Just before that, there is a question from Gavin.
There is a question. Thanks for the question, Gavin. So is accreditation dynamic, i.e. once initially accreditation is got, does this get updated as field compliance, assurance, etc. is uploaded? Right.
You want to take this, Tony?
Tony?
Happy to take it. Can I just make sure that I understand the question correctly, Gavin? Are you asking whether we're updating accreditation status as we go? Just want to make sure that I get that right.
Let me check. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, welcome.
Okay, good, thanks. Yeah, just out of interest in terms of the maturity of the digital system. So, for argument's sake, you've done your call it baseline accreditation or vetting, and then as you know, all these other performance data gets into the system. Is that accreditation score real time and dynamic, or
Yeah.
are you working towards that, just out of interest?
Yeah, so Gavin, what we do at the moment, I mean, obviously, because we've moved away from that sort of once-off accreditation review to more regular reviews, we've also kind of cross-referenced that with an assurance plan. So to really deliver on the principle of that focus on workers done, we actually engage in multiple different types of assurance activities. So, for example, we've got a little AI program that currently runs on our PTW system, and that basically does the first bit of assurance checks from a documentation point of view. But there are multiple different types of assurance activities, you know, task observations, field leadership engagements, you know, typical sort of inspections on site. So there's multiple different assurance activities, and we feed all of that data into our contractor database. What that does is that you have, like you said, at any point in time, you have a live, most current view on what your contractor status is. Don't necessarily call it an accreditation status, but you have a real-time view in terms of, you know, what is the state of compliance with a particular contractor. The nice thing is that, you know, we could open up that information, you know, in the interest of transparency to multiple different individuals, not just the contractor themselves, but any of your other assurance workers or clients, whatever the case may be. So yes, definitely want a real-time view on what the status of compliance is on our contractors, hence why we continue to feed data into one central system so that we do have a line of sight in terms of where they are. But the nice thing is also where we have identified gaps, we actually automatically go into that corrective and preventative action cycle, and we're actually able to track that. So at any given moment, you're actually able to see if there has been particular findings or corrective work that needs to happen on a contractor. Where in the process are they? You know, are they closing out on that? Are we satisfied, you know, with what they've given back to us from a corrective perspective, and continue to close that feedback loop. So certainly all of that has been considered as parts of this digital transformation journey. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Because I know quality historically, or in the old days, a contractor would be accredited for argument's sake, a year. But I've never quite been comfortable with that, because, you know, call it a head office audit is all very nice, but once they hit the field, things tend to happen. So, absolutely, you know, as a client, you'd almost want a flag when that overall performance reaches a red level, call it 80%, 75%, and then just to raise a little flag for an intervention. Because obviously, you know, it's, as you said, the contractor is an extension of the client or is the client. So it shouldn't be a big stick approach and so forth.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Good, good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Gavin.
Thanks.
Right, moving on. Anybody else with a question? Thanks for that question, Gavin. Ladies, I take it you delivered this very well, that everyone understands the risks associated with managing contractors and the step-by-step process that one can apply to actually mitigate those risks. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, Julia, we've actually really not even scratched the surface today. I think there's a lot of elements in the conversation today that you could really go into a great amount of detail. And maybe those could potentially be ideas for future webinars. So if our current audience has a particular element that they are interested in, you know, just pop us a mail and we'll happily look at that. But there is, you know, trying to capture contractor management in an hour is almost impossible. But there's a lot of additional things that we could talk about and we could explore that I think would give the audience greater insight into a bit of the detail behind the scenes. But
Great
happy to
stuff.
do that at some point in the future.
Yes, thank you for that invitation, Tony. So you had it,
Yeah.
colleagues, audience, please do send those requests. Tony is availing herself here together with Benji. I'll make sure that they come back to
Yes.
deliver the second round to address those specific details that you would have wanted more information on. And with that, yes, go ahead, Benji.
Just to add to that, you know, if it may not be potentially a webinar, but there's any, you know, questions that they have or things that they want to explore, we're very open to doing that with, you know, whatever engagement that they would like to have.
They can trust us.
Yes.
We're not the contractor and the extraction type of movies. we are people that care about people and want to see our contractors succeed just as much as Pragma succeed as well. All right. Any closing remarks, starting with you, Tony? So especially on the end of symbiosis, I got it right. So proud of myself on this. Yes. Any closing remarks, just to remind our audience again, what do we mean by that and how they can start applying it? I really feel that it's an important concept and it should be something that we think about every day.
Yeah, so it's quite the tongue twister, Julia. But yes, like I said, it's a principle or a concept that we've borrowed from biology. And it really means that, you know, you have one organism living profitably in another organism. So not this typical type of relationship where you have one organism living in the other but feeding off of it, but really where you have a mutually beneficial relationship. So given that concept, what we're saying is that something like compliance, whether it's quality management, HSSC, whatever the case may be, must actually live within the largest sort of work execution, work planning and control business process type of environment, really profitably within other processes and systems and not as a separate entity that is operating somewhere else or really in isolation. So that's the principle, that's the concept, and we're hoping to develop that a little bit further. But I think in terms of the projects that we're working on at the moment, where we're taking something like a permit to work system and completely weaving that into the everything and the everything that contractors are doing on site, I think that really demonstrates that the whole idea, you know, of one system living productively in another.
With that, it is unfortunately time to wrap it up. I did ask for an hour of your time and I've gone a little bit over. I hope you forgive me. It was really that good so that we had to just go a little bit over. If there is anything to take away from this, perhaps you feel that your systems and processes are working well, you're all good, you've got it all covered, just take the endosymbiosis thing. Oh, I wanted an opportunity to practice it again and I got it right. So take that away, go practice it, apply it in your contractor environment, and where you get stuck, call us and we will help you. Thank you very much, my audience, and thank you, Venji and Tony, for the great insights you've shared with us. And I look forward to the questions that will be coming, hopefully by email, with more information so we can have a follow-up session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Julia.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.